In a school ranked by class, wealth, and status, the imposing gates loomed as a barrier between privilege and reality. A tall blonde girl lingered just outside, clutching her designer handbag as though it were a lifeline. Her eyes darted nervously at the passing students, who entered with an air of entitlement that only years of wealth could bring. She took a shaky breath and stepped through the gates. The moment she entered, the whispers began. "Who is she? Look at her bag. It's limited edition. She must be loaded." She tightened her grip on the handbag and quickened her pace, her heels clicking against the pristine floor. The stairs burned into her back, but she didn't falter. Not yet. She navigated through the halls, each step heavier than the last, until she reached the principal's office. Inside sat a tall, stern man, his sharp glasses reflecting the sunlight streaming through the blinds. He glanced up and studied her briefly before speaking. "You must be the new student," he said, his voice a blend of authority and disinterest. "Welcome to Crestwood High." Relief flickered across her face as he handed her a piece of paper. "These are the instructions to find your class. Good luck." She thanked him quietly and left the office, unfolding the paper with trembling hands. Before she could begin deciphering the directions, a woman with a clipboard approached her. "You must be the new student," the teacher said warmly. "I'm Mrs. Kate, your homeroom teacher. Let me show you to your class." Mrs. Kate led her through the hallways, which buzzed with chatter and side-eyes. By the time they reached the classroom, she was acutely aware of the attention she was garnering. "Everyone," Mrs. Kate announced, "this is your new classmate. Be sure to make her feel welcome." The girl stepped forward hesitantly, her presence immediately commanding the room. Yet the students were less focused on her than on the bag she carried. "Is that real?" one student whispered. "Must have cost a fortune," another replied. At the front of the classroom sat a girl with icy blue eyes and an unmistakable aura of authority. Ivy, the reigning queen of Crestwood, leaned back in her chair, scrutinizing the newcomer's every move. Her gaze lingered on the bag, a flicker of curiosity and irritation crossing her face. It didn't take long for the girl to notice how the room was organized. The wealthiest students occupied the front row, followed by the second-class rich, then the middle-class students, and finally the back row, reserved for those deemed poor. "What does your father do for a living?" Mrs. Kate asked suddenly, her tone casual but her intent clear. The girl froze for a moment before replying, "He's a CEO." "Which company?" "GreenTech," she said, her voice steady but her hands trembling slightly. Mrs. Kate smiled approvingly. "Well, welcome. You'll sit in the front row." The whispers resumed, this time louder and more reverent. By the next day, she was the most talked-about student. A limousine dropped her off at school and students swarmed around her, praising her style and offering to carry her bag. Meanwhile, Ivy watched from the sidelines, her irritation growing. "She's stealing your spotlight," one of her minions whispered. "Not for long," Ivy replied, her eyes narrowing. In the cafeteria, the tension between the two came to a head. As they sat with the wealthiest students, Ivy glanced at the girl's lunchbox. "What's that?" she asked, her tone dripping with disdain. "It looks unappetizing." The girl's cheeks flushed. "Oh, my chef must have packed the wrong food," she said quickly, closing the box. But Ivy wasn't convinced. Later that day, during PE, Ivy suggested a shopping trip, and the other girls eagerly agreed. The girl's willingness to spend without hesitation only deepened Ivy's suspicion. That evening, Ivy's father announced they were visiting the CEO of GreenTech for a business meeting. Ivy's heart leapt at the opportunity. Arriving at the luxurious estate, she entered with calculated grace. Midway through the meeting, Ivy feigned curiosity. "Mr. Felix," she began sweetly, "do you have a daughter? I'd love to meet her." Mr. Felix's expression darkened. "My daughter has been hospitalized for years due to illness," he said tersely. Ivy's father glared at her. "Ivy, enough. Apologize at once." But Ivy didn't care. She had her answer. The next day, the girl walked through the hallway, her designer bag in tow, when she spotted Ivy standing on a chair with a microphone. Her heart sank as she realized what was happening. "Attention, everyone," Ivy called out. I have something to share about our so-called new classmate. Before Ivy could continue, the girl rushed forward, snatching the microphone. Tears streamed down her face as she addressed the crowd. My name is Amelia, she began, her voice breaking. And I've been lying. I'm not rich. The designer bags and clothes were gifts from Mr. Felix, my employer. I work as his assistant, and he paid for me to attend this school. I thought I could fit in if I pretended, but I can't anymore. I'm sorry. The hallway fell silent. Students exchanged awkward glances, unsure of how to react. Ivy stood frozen, her triumph soured by Amelia's honesty. One thing we should all know is that no matter how we hide it, the truth remains the same always, and in no matter of time it will be out. That's the truth.